I really like A Short Hike. It's a game where you play as Claire, a young bird spending her summer at Hawk Peak Park. Claire is expecting a phone call, but can't get any service anywhere except for at the summit of the mountain, meaning that today is the day that she finally makes the trek up the mountain, bumping into all sorts of different characters along the way. It's only a short game. Well, it's a short hike, but there isn't a single footstep that doesn't feel full of love. And you can massively extend the lifespan of the game by spending your time doing whatever you'd like. Be that collecting things, making new friends, completing quests, fishing, racing, exploring, or admiring the beauty of the island. To say that A Short Hike looks, sounds, and feels gorgeous isn't some revolutionary statement by any means, but how else can you describe this game? The big crunchy pixel look and vibrant colours give it such a nostalgic and warm feeling, even in the not so warm areas. And at its heart, this game is an extremely cozy one. So this, along with the lovely autumnal colour palette, fits really well. This little world also never feels void of life. Even in areas that don't have people, or animals, I guess, there are little objects that remind us that, hey, yeah, this is somewhere that people like to go. You know, a little picnic bench here, some of those big binocular things there. It's these little things that just add some depth to the world. The soundtrack often follows this leitmotif throughout, which sort of ties each area of the game together, even if each track gives off a slightly different feeling from one another. Something I really do love about this game is how the music and the weather will seamlessly change when you do travel from one area to another. It sets the tone of where you are without interrupting the flow of the game while you explore. A Short Hike also controls really well. A controller is recommended, but I like to play the game using keyboard and mouse. And after some small keybind changes that suit me a little better, there was no stopping me. You can sort of control the camera a little bit, but not really. And that's okay, because the camera movement is pretty spot on 95% of the time. The only issue it can have is when you're moving really fast around certain areas, and suddenly the camera thinks you're in Narnia or something. The game feels so nice to control that you might often find yourself running and flying around just for the sake of it. While A Short Hike does have that main goal of reaching the top of Hawk Peak, in a weird way, this doesn't actually feel like the focus of the game for the most part. As you make your way up the trail, you'll bump into all sorts of different characters who will often give you some kind of reason to go off the beaten path and explore other areas. In fact, one of the first characters that you'll probably bump into immediately gives you the task of collecting 15 shells. So, naturally, you start looking around for them, and then, you've bumped into this little dude, and now you're looking out for a spade. Then, further on, you run into this rabbit, and now you've got a lucky headband to look out for. But wait, you found the spade here, so let's go back and trade it for a real shovel. And very quickly, you're not quite as concerned about getting to Hawk Peak as you are about doing all of this other stuff. This game is, at its heart, actually all about exploration. There are coins, items, feathers, and chests littered about all around the island, and you only really find them by having a wander around. This is honestly one of the best parts of the game. I really love exploring all of the different areas in A Short Hike, because it's not all just grass and dirt. There are genuinely interesting things to find. Oftentimes you'll find yourself in areas completely hidden from any of the main trails, and start to get more of a feeling and understanding of the island. This area could have been left empty, because realistically, you're not going to be spending all that much time here, but instead we see a little picnic bench and an umbrella. It's a small detail, but one that I really enjoy. You know, this is already next to an abandoned building area, which gives this specific spot a lot of character and history already, but this is a great example of how there is nowhere in this game that feels empty or boring, and it gives me such a huge motivation to explore. Oftentimes, exploration is actually necessary to progress in this game. The main thing that gatekeeps you from getting to certain areas is the feather mechanic. You start the game with 0 golden feathers, just a bald little bird person thing. And this means you're pretty limited in what you can do. since feathers are the resource mechanic for flapping your wings, climbing, and running. Now, there are a few different ways that you can get feathers. You can buy them from select characters, find some scattered around the island, win them in different competitions or challenges, get them from golden chests, or earn them by completing quests. But all of these require you to explore in some way. If you stayed on the main path, you'd barely find any opportunities, and even if you did, you'd be flat broke. You need about 7 golden feathers as a minimum in the later area of the game, because you went on holiday without bringing so much as a jacket. Well done. So your feathers freeze up, instead of regenerating like they usually would, unless you take a dip in the hot springs. So to actually finish the game, you need to do at least a little bit of exploring. The more feathers that you get, the easier it'll be to just generally traverse too. At the start of the game, you'll be confined to slowly walking everywhere, like an absolute loser. But later on in the game, you'll be running everywhere, climbing over any obstacle, or balls to it, just flying past anything that once stood in your way. So the progression in this game is something that you really can feel. It literally becomes easier to do anything once you've gotten a bunch of feathers. And this is really obvious once you do the challenges that limit you to only 3 feathers, because how did I used to live like this? It's really nice to feel this progression as your options start to open up, and you can start to get to places that you weren't able to before. You can also actually get a couple of silver feathers, which speed you up and make you better at things like climbing or running, while also improving your flight. So these are another little bonus for later on in the game that really let you feel that progression. Aside from this though, you'll find progression in a few other ways. Once you find the bucket, you'll be able to water these little sprouts, which become bouncy flowers. This seems like a fun little novelty at first, but they're actually pretty damn useful for getting around. So, as you go, and the more sprouts you water, the easier and faster it is to get anywhere in this game. You also can't actually run when you first start out, and this sort of forces you to stop and smell the flowers a little bit, rather than racing past everything at 1,000,000 miles an hour. But once you help the tortoise and the hare get ready for their race, love the reference, 10 out of 10, no notes, you get the running shoes. Again, this just makes it easier to get around places, and these sort of things really do incentivize you to go around and talk to the different characters, or look around for items, because you never know what doors might open up for you. A short hike is a very non-linear game. Right from the get-go, you're left to your own devices. In fact, even the main goal of getting to Hawk Peak is more of a suggestion than anything else. Go up the mountain, don't go up the mountain, go fishing for a few hours, see if I care. While the game gives you so many different options for where to go next, or what to do, it doesn't really push you towards any particular one in any way whatsoever. Of course, this is pretty vital for those exploration elements that we talked about earlier, but beyond that, it really does give the game such a cozy and relaxing feeling. If you're not making a cup of tea or a hot chocolate to sip on while playing, then you're doing it wrong. I think if you constantly had something nagging you to get back to the trail or to finish this quest before moving onwards, the game would suddenly become so much less appealing. Because a short hike really isn't about how quickly you can get to the top of Hawk Peak, it's about the journey you take to get there, and all of the people you meet along the way. I first played this game a couple of years ago, and in that initial playthrough, I spoke to Ranger May, and then immediately went the opposite direction that you're realistically supposed to go. And this didn't take away from the experience whatsoever. Even though I took it upon myself to get completely and utterly lost in about 30 seconds, I was still playing the game in the same way. Whereas in my more recent playthrough, I went along the standard path to start with, and my first 3 feathers were the shop, on top of a rock, and for winning at Beach Stick Ball. I know, right? Beach Stick Ball. How cute's that? My earlier playthrough's first 3 feathers were Beach Stick Ball, on top of the tower, and from Lookout Point. I think this is just a testament to how well the non-linearity works in this game. The initial area wasn't fenced off at all, and there was nothing stopping me from wandering around in the wrong direction. But this also didn't impact my enjoyment of the game, nor did it take away from its progression. You can take each challenge in whatever order you'd like to. Maybe it'll be harder without any feathers, but the important thing is that you can still try. The only linear aspect is, of course, the required 7 feathers for the later part of the game. But if you're willing to put in like 30 minutes into collecting them, then it's not really a huge obstacle. Of course though, this doesn't mean that everything in the world is completely disconnected from one another. There are a couple of characters that will reference each other in this game in some way. For example, the shopkeeper and the scalper. You can find out about their connection to one another from either one, but it's written in a way that works no matter which order you find them in. This can actually be quite rewarding at times. At one point I spoke to somebody that offhandedly mentioned that there was a second person that they've had to turn away for the marathon. I thought nothing of this because the dialogue is written very naturally in this game, but later I asked a character called Avery about it, and it turns out that this is the person that the other character was talking about the whole time. And I don't know, it just felt like this nice little world building moment that made the island feel so much more connected. The game takes place during summer break, a time that's pretty well known for young people to enjoy a bit of freedom, away from the constricts and stresses of term time. And because of the non-linear nature of this game, this is actually also a really good description of how the game feels to play. There are no stresses, because there are no expectations of you. No overarching destination for you to get to, if you don't actually want to. And there are no constricts, because the game truly doesn't care what you do. It gives you options galore, but it's really up to you to find them, or even decide if you want to do anything with them. At the end of the day, the world could offer you a chance to fly, but sometimes all you want to do is fish. If the exploration is the base of the cake, and the freedom is the icing, then the characters in A Short Hike are the sprinkles on top. It's not hard to bump into a load of interesting characters on your journey to Hawk Peak, and every single one of them seems to have their own unique personality that they manage to get across very clearly in the short interactions that you have with them. Some characters can be a bit bratty and demanding, some are really chill, some are, well, a lot less chill about anything, ever, and some can come off pretty cold-hearted. Even Claire herself has a pretty strong personality. There's this one area by the lighthouse that overlooks her Aunt May where you can shout down to her. And I don't know why, but this was just a pretty nice interaction, because this is something that any kid would do when climbing up to somewhere high and wanting your family to see. So it highlights the innocent nature of a character really well. And this can be quite refreshing at times, because a lot of games tend to have a less charismatic player character and keep them as widely appealing as possible. But here, we get what we get, which is a very cemented personality. I found that the dialogue in A Short Hike was some of the most natural sounding I've ever read in a game. Even if some of the characters are exaggerated in one way or another, the way they talk feels very normal and fitting. This is something that I tend to find a lot in indie games, since the dialogue doesn't have to go through half a dozen people and end up a bit of a mishmash of all their ideas, but A Short Hike especially seems to have this on lockdown. For example, when you talk to the turtle, he gives you this headband for a quest, and instead of saying something along the lines of, "I know what'll work, here, take this headband," he's much more laid back about it, and when you say you're not sure, he even ends up saying, "Oh, I don't know, just take it, see if she wants it." You just get these very natural sounding interactions throughout the entire game. It really is like you've just met somebody out on a walk. They're happy to talk to you, most of the time, but they've also got their own stuff going on and are pretty ready to get on with their own tasks. Something that I found quite funny was how they handled that awkward little task of trying to tell the player how to do a certain mechanic. One of the first characters that you'll likely meet asks you, "Did you know that you can hold space while running to glide through the air?" To which Claire responds with, "Of course, everyone knows that. Why do you ask?" And they respond with, "I don't know, I just had a feeling you might want to know." It's honestly quite a nice way of doing it, embracing that awkward cliche interaction and instantly brushing it off, instead of dwelling on it, or trying to find some in-character way of explaining it without actually mentioning control schemes. Even outside of the characters, the game is still full of charm. The colours, the music, the art style, everything just complements each other so well. The world really does feel like this quaint little retreat where you'd go over the summertime. While you are relevant to what happens here, you know, in all of the quests and activities and whatever else, you know that even if you weren't here, the park would still be full of life. A short hike ends when you finally manage to reach the top of Hawk Peak. It's truly beautiful, with these gorgeous purples and blues behind a snowy sky. The game lingers and lets you take it in for a while, before you get a phone call which reminds you why you've been doing all of this in the first place. It's from your mother, who's recently had surgery. It's quite a tender moment, highlighted by the delicate soundtrack, but the game doesn't dwell on it for too long, and soon you get to experience the Hawk Peak updraft, and fully admire the beauty of the island. At its core, A Short Hike is a game about exploration, progression, and freedom, with a nice little story, tons of lovable characters, and genuinely fun mechanics. And while the game is short, you really can stretch it out a fair bit by trying to complete all the quests, find and water all of the flowers, catch every single fish. Seriously, this is quite addicting actually. Collect every feather, or by taking in all of the beauty of Hawk Peak Park. I really like A Short Hike.